Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest installments.
Chapter 7. Getting the Band Together. "What kind of link?" asked Douglas. Baines opened her mouth to explain about Sargo Lemelisk and his possible connection to the chief engineer when the door chimed. Letting out an exasperated sigh, Douglas tried to keep the irritation from his voice as he called, "Enter." Lieutenant Singh appeared at the door. "The councillors and the department heads are all here, Captain. Shall I show them in?" Douglas looked back to Baines. "This will have to wait until later," he told her quietly, taking his seat at the head of the table as captain. "Show them in, please, Lieutenant." Mother Sarah Fellows took her usual seat on Douglas's left, with Dr. Satnam Patel to the right. The officers and team leaders took the remaining seats, as they had on previous occasions. "Thank you for coming, everyone," Douglas greeted them. "We know you're all enormously busy at the moment." Glancing to his fellow councillors on either side, he added, "And we're very grateful for all your efforts." He waited for everyone to be seated, and for crewman Mary Hutchins to serve drinks and dispense a few plates of nibbles. "Firstly," he continued, "we would like to start with an issue that's been on all our minds lately." He looked to Patricia Norris. "Doctor, did your examination of the forensic evidence from the crime scenes turn anything up?" Patricia linked her fingers together and placed her hands on the table as she spoke. "I'm sorry, Captain. We found only a small amount of Lieutenant Lloyd's DNA on the wormhole drive mounting brackets, as collected by the EVA team." She appeared uncomfortable for a moment and continued delicately. "Dr. Wright did find some evidence of crewman Bacchini on the walls as residue from the blast, but no fingerprints." Norris shrugged. "After such a powerful explosion, this is perhaps not surprising." "So it's as we thought, then?" asked Baines. "Mario didn't touch anything prior to the blast?" "Not as far as we can tell," replied Norris. "We found nothing at all in the core reactor. The only thing that stands out about this is that the whole area should have the fingerprints and DNA of at least 6 engineers all over it. The complete lack of, well, anything has to be classed as suspicious, to put it mildly. But that's all we have, I'm afraid. Our only evidence of foul play is the lack of evidence." Douglas shared a secret uncomfortable look with Baines. "Thank you for your hard work and diligence, Doctor. This wasn't unexpected, but we had to try," he said simply. Major White put his hand up to interject. "Captain?" "Ford?" replied Douglas, inviting the Major to speak. "Just a small point I would like to make about this evidence, or deficit. Firstly, 2 bomb sites, but only one has any incriminating evidence around it. Why would that be? Secondly, the only suspect we have can't easily be placed at the second bomb site at all. Now, assuming we even have the right guy, does this mean that he made a careless mistake at the first site and pulled himself together for the second one? Or does it mean we have 2 criminals working in tandem, one of whom is more, shall we say, professional than the other? Or, and this may be even more scary, folks, do we have 2 criminals working separately with 2 entirely separate agendas?" The silence greeting this statement fairly rocked the room. Baines and Douglas shared an even more uncomfortable look, both measuring the Major's description against both of the engineers potentially incriminated. Baines cleared her throat. "If that's a small point, Ford, please be sure to warn me if you ever want to make a big one. I might want to get to a lifeboat or something." A nervous titter circulated, but the tension remained. Douglas looked at Major White. "Ford, that's a pretty terrifying prospect, and I'm sure my colleagues will all agree with me when I say we can't ignore the possibility you might be onto something. Can you take this on? For those of you who don't know," he addressed the gathering, "we are fortunate in that Major White has an ex-copper on his strength. A detective, no less." He looked back to White. "Can you get Rick Drummond to start sniffing about and see what he can turn up by walking back through the 36-hour period between takeoff and the explosion, please?" White nodded, making a note on his pad. Of course, Captain. I'll talk to him as soon as we're done here. The next item on the agenda is weapons. Dr. Patel's team have been working with Major White's security force to come up with some new toys, we understand, said Douglas, nodding for Patel to continue. Yes, Patel began. Together we've re-engineered some of our stun rifles into something more powerful. We upgraded all of the power cells, transformers and conductors to produce a weapon capable of delivering almost 50 times more punch than the original was capable of. Baines whistled. Impressive. Will that be enough, or too much perhaps, depending on what we find on the ground? You may well ask, Commander, Patel nodded, acceding to a point. We are not really sure what we will find, but as these weapons can now kill, us at least, great care will be required in their use. Training will be made available for the crew and passengers as we bring more of them online. I know arming everyone isn't ideal, but it may be a fact of life soon for anyone leaving the ship. Although I'm sure the Americans among us will feel right at home, he added with a wry smile. It will be like a very, very Wild West. I'll unpack my chaps. White offered his customary lopsided grin. The guidance of Mr. Norris has been invaluable to our preparations, continued Patel. We would have been completely in the dark otherwise, having no other experts in this field aboard. He nodded his appreciation to Tim's mother, Patricia. However, it would be folly to rely on one man alone, so I strongly suggest we all try and learn as much as we can about this time, this world. The ship's library has some information, and Mr. Norris has copied his personal data onto the network for anyone to view. He is also working on a Cretaceous induction course so that we can spend a few quality hours with him in the schoolroom in small groups over the next few days. Hopefully, this will help every one of us to get to grips with what we face. Now, moving back to the rifles, we have fitted a dial controlling the power setting to each one. At the moment, these are gaffer-taped to the stock of each weapon. They may look a little, jerry-rigged, but they work. At minimum setting, they may still be used in an anti-personnel capacity. As Major White has rather worryingly suggested, there may still be an enemy in our midst. These weapons will stun an adult human easily. Our hope is that, when set to maximum, these stun rifles will give even the biggest animals a nasty enough shock to make them leave us alone. He looked directly at Mother Sarah. Most importantly, they will provide us with defense, but also with alternatives to killing. That's encouraging, said Douglas. How many do we have? Just 7 at the moment, Captain, interjected White. But we and Doc Patel's team are working with Jim Miller's people to begin production of new rifles and sidearms using this technology as we speak. However, for now our taped-together Heath Riflesons, as we call them, should at least give us an edge. Weren't you working on some kind of grenades as well? Asked Douglas. Patel answered. We are working on a stun grenade which will be capable of emanating a subsonic frequency. It is our hope that a blast of infrasound will stun or at least scare away any animals which may threaten us. However, we've hit a snag in that regard. Oh? Asked Douglas. Yes, thanks to the information provided again by Tim Norris, we now understand that some of the larger animals may possibly use these very low frequencies to communicate, rather in the way that elephants used to before they were driven to extinction in our own time. Patel looked slightly abashed. And? Prompted Baines mischievously, sensing his discomfiture. Patel loosened his collar uncomfortably. It's possible they may use infrasound as part of their mating call and ritual, he finished awkwardly. Baines burst out laughing. Ford White joined in the merriment, asking, I guess we'd better be careful what message we're sending them then, huh? And hope to God they don't RSVP, quipped Baines. Patel smiled weakly, his dark face flushing with embarrassment. Let's just say we'll need to work on it after we've managed to run tests on the ground. If we can isolate a frequency they use to signify a warning, that would of course be preferable to one they use to... I'm sure there will be quite a bit of trial and error. As we shall be dealing with such large animals, they... He realized he was digging a hole. Anyway, we do have a temporary fix for this problem in the shape of a device created by Captain Gleason, our explosives expert. Major White knows more about them than I. Patel gestured open-handed for White to continue the briefing, gratefully sitting back in his seat. Captain Gleason, said White, taking up the baton, has created a grenade which has very limited explosive power but makes one hell of a bang. It's kind of like an electronically operated firework. He gave his best imitation of the Australian. You throw the switch, and then you throw the stick, as Gleason puts it. Throw it as far as you can in 5 seconds, and bang! White mimed the explosion with his hands. Gleason calls them his dingo wingers, because he says they'll put just about any wild critter to flight. Oh, and he reckons they're beaut. The Major finished, eliciting smiles around the table. The Australian seemed to be very popular despite his outspoken, occasionally coarse ways. Perhaps because of them. That's a very positive start, thank you, commended Douglas. Now we move on to the vehicles. How are we progressing, doctors? He aimed this question at Dr. Samantha Portree and Dr. Sam Burton. Burton spoke first.
My people have been working with elements of Dr. Portree's team, specifically her expert welders, to lighten and reinforce some of the vehicles for reconnaissance. My fellow Kiwi, Dr. Tom Wood, and I have put our heads together to begin shedding weight from a couple of large four-wheel drive people carriers. Tom's still working on the details, but we've already begun the prototypes. Hollow box ladder struts will provide more structural strength and support than the vehicles had originally. They aren't pretty, but they should protect the drivers and passengers. We can't increase the power output at this short notice. That would require extensive upgrades to the motors, so we've opted for a structural solution to the problem. The introduction of crumple zones should improve their ability to handle a pounding without passing the shock through to the people inside, which is, of course, our primary concern. Again, Patricia's son has been showing us images, animations and fact files illustrating the types of threats we're likely to face. He terrified poor Tom half to death, he added, chuckling.
You should try being his mother, said Patricia. When he was younger, the books I read to him at bedtime used to keep me awake.
Well, with the help of Mr. Norris's shock tactics, we now have 2 vehicles undergoing the process, and we expect to have them ready by tomorrow, Burton continued. We should be able to bring a couple of lorries with cranes online soon after. We'll need them to carry any loads we may need to move, timber and such. After that, we're going to need to alter the diggers and some other equipment as soon as possible for the next stage of our plan. I'll let Samantha explain that as our construction and mining expert.
Thank you,
Portree acknowledged. The large screen built into the glass wall at the far end of the meeting table shimmered to life as the American linked it to her tablet. Calling up diagrammatical representations showing the new world on the ground, she explained her plan for ringed enclosures.
We see it like this. One of the first priorities upon landing will be to create a small D-shaped enclosure against the ship to provide a safe area outside for our personnel. Once complete, we can begin work on a much larger perimeter earthwork to protect the ship from damage by large animals. The hull plating is pretty tough, but despite over a century and a half of sci-fi movies to draw on, we still haven't invented shields yet.
Mother Sarah leaned forward, speaking for the first time.
Is the ship likely to be in danger once we've landed? She asked. It seems amazing that something so huge could be threatened by animals.
It could possibly be damaged by a stampede of 80-ton sauropods, or even by a concentrated attack from some of the huge pack hunters that terrorize these times, answered Portree seriously. If animals glimpse us through any of the windows or portholes, they may react aggressively. The New World is not a warship. She was designed to meet only the very specific stresses and strains of flight, landing, and cargo haulage. I'm sure the engineers amongst us will agree with me when I say that although she's a behemoth, she's also fragile in many ways. Anyhow, our plan is to use the diggers, load lifters, and lorries we have, once they're adapted, to create an earthwork around the ship. We even have a bulldozer we can deploy if necessary,
although bringing all of these vehicles into service will take time if we are to guarantee the safety of operatives and passengers.
When you say earthwork, are you suggesting something like a hill fort? Asked Douglas, thinking of the myriad forts atop the Cheviot Mountains and the Eildon Hills near where he grew up.
Exactly, Captain, answered Portree. Once we have our ditch and earthwork, we'll begin tree felling to produce a palisaded stockade with gates. We may also need to redirect a stream through our compound for fresh water if there's no spring. We'll just have to see how the land lies when we get there. If we do have to redirect a stream into the first ever man-made reservoir and let it out again, we can easily weld together a couple of steel grills to keep the wildlife out of the watercourse. However, I think it's only fair to mention that after speaking with Tim, I strongly suggest that no one goes swimming.
Major White took up the baton. As more vehicles become available, my team will patrol the site offering protection for the workforce. There's even talk of building some dirt bikes to aid travel through the rough terrain we're likely to find. The vehicles we have will initially be needed for foraging and mapping expeditions in conjunction with the shuttle, and I think I'm right in saying, he looked to Burton and Singh for confirmation, that the New World's escape pods can, with a little modification, be pressed into service as small reconnaissance craft?
White took a drink whilst Burton and Singh voiced their agreement.
This will leave the shuttle free for more heavy-duty assignments, Captain. Fortunately, the fuel used by the lifeboats is the same as the shuttlecraft, and we have reasonable supplies of this. As some of you may be aware, we were scheduled to deliver a large consignment of shuttle fuel to Township 4 on Mars.
White smiled wryly.
I'll bet the chief quartermaster was bouncing when we didn't show. It won't be helping their logistics any. He must be out there right now, cussin'.
Ford tailed off thoughtfully. An introspective moment followed as everyone considered all that must somehow still be going on in their own century. Even for the extraordinary minds sat around the briefing table, this was a very difficult concept for any mortal to grasp across such a breadth of time. They had left these people and their lives behind just a few days ago, but now none of them would exist for almost 100 million years. Possibly not even then, if the New World's crew messed things up in their subjective now.
I think right now is a loaded term these days, Major, Douglas noted calmly, calling everyone home. Anyway, what's the timescale for all this?
Tentatively 6 months,
replied Portree, looking around the table for any contradictions. None came.
That's best guess anyway, Captain,
she concluded. Thank you, Doc. In the middle of his reply, Douglas's comm beeped persistently. My apologies, he said, activating the device. Douglas here.
Captain, Sergeant Jackson, sir.
In the background, Douglas could hear what sounded like an altercation. We're in council at the moment, Sarge. Is this urgent?
I'm sorry, Captain, but I would have to say that it is. We have a very serious situation down in engineering, and I really think you need to double down here, sir.
Very good, Sarge. I'm on my way. Douglas out, he said, rising to leave. Sorry, everyone. This sounds important. Commander Baines will take over for me until I can return. Thank you. Baines flashed him a look of concern. I'll be in touch. Carry on, Commander. The vast bulk of the USS New World shone brilliant white, drenched in the light of her star. The Earth, from which she was made, was close now. She was almost home. But the previous owners were still in residence, with no intention to sell for a very long time. Tim Norris was the only person aboard who really understood what awaited her crew. But at the moment, he was more concerned about a girl holding his hand across a table in a bar. After spilling his life story and revealing so much of himself, he began to feel a little self-conscious. Realizing he was still holding hands with Rose, he felt a little more so. When Woodsy finally walked in, he got the hat-trick.
Oi, oi, how long's this been going on?
Shouted the young New Zealander.
Hey, Sokar, get a look at this,
he called across the room to Hank Bernstein Jr., also approaching them with the face of the rising grin.
Way to go, dude,
Hank added appreciatively. Tim released Rose's hand quickly.
Trust you two to barge in.
He stopped, looking puzzled.
So, Car,
he asked, looking to Woodsy for explanation. Woodsy, already laughing, jabbed a thumb over his shoulder towards Hank.
Son of Captain America. It's like Son of Godzilla, but the suits are even bigger.
Dick, said Hank, play-punching his shoulder. Laughing and pushing each other around boisterously, they made their way to the bar. Woodsy turned back.
Hey, Tim, what are you two drinking? A nice bubbly, perhaps? Would you like me to arrange some candles for the table? Maybe an Italian waiter? Roses! A violinist! He shouted, completely unabashed.
No, Tim rejoined. Just he jumped ship. Pint, please. Just the usual, thank you.
Hank and Woodsy continued to laugh raucously at Tim's discomfort.
Hey, don't get too sloshed,
Woodsy called back.
We've got some important business to discuss tonight. This dump still needs a name.
Rose was also enjoying Tim's embarrassment, but hid her grin behind her hand. She was really growing quite fond of him. But, like a bolt of lightning, she realized that she liked Hank, the quintessential tall, square-jawed, all-American boy, a lot. The 4 teenagers sat around the table. Hank sat next to Rose. She couldn't help wondering if this was intentional. "Tim, when we get back to Earth, will there be any cavemen?" she asked. Hank smiled indulgently as Tim and Woodsy looked at one another.
"You're joking, right?"
asked Woodsy. Rose merely frowned in puzzlement.
"Ha ha!"
he laughed loudly.
"The 1970s live!"
Rose's frown went double or nothing. "Eh?" she asked.
What Woodsy means, offered Tim, in his obliquely insolent way, is that in some fairly deadly ancient movies, they used to show cavemen and dinosaurs together, thinking that the public wouldn't know any better. There may also have been a human-centric angle too. Nothing could possibly have existed before us, that kind of thing.
Woodsy was still sniggering, and Tim elbowed him in the ribs.
Of course, people were less well-educated then,
he added delicately.
"Unlike now,"
laughed Woodsy sarcastically. "Well, things do change," Hank noted politically. Rose said, "Yeah, totally."
Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. New installments uploaded each week. Subscribe for more. Visit the link in the description for free New World companion stories, available for download as ebooks.